O tired soul, what causes you to keep walking? When a subject became a god, what happened to mankind? Where did kindness and humanhood go? In tonight's episode, I would like to look into a concept which I find is crucial. Eventually, somebody needs to speak about it, and I feel many have pointed to it, but I have to use the advantage of, you can say playfully, this life's DNA. The inspiration for the title came from a concept that I had spoken about in my other talks, and it was that man was involved with object worship, with idol worship. There are many stories to suggest this. And so I wondered, I wondered what is it that made man move on from an object as if there was a need to fulfill something. There was a mystery in the mind of man to declare something as truth. Now, that mystery, that urge of completion, one can say, was to make the unconscious conscious, as Carl Jung would say. So we can say, in some sense, people were they saw an object. Or let me give you a good example. It's like, imagine a group of people see a chair, and one of them sees the sunlight hit the chair, and that person suddenly thinks the chair is God. Then suddenly we have groups of people who are bowing down to this chair. Until the owner of the chair comes, looks outside his window, and he's like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "What are you guys doing with my chair?" And they're like, "Don't touch our God," And he's like, "Give me my chair back." And so the objects were slapped out of man's hand. So object worship, idol worship, there was a graduation, there was evolution beyond it. Now, what did we move on to? Many people can consider the idea of object worship, but what did we move on to? I feel we became language worshippers. In other words, we moved on into subject worship. And so that's what I mean by the title, when a subject became a god, when the attention of the human being no longer was just satisfied with its attention just being on the objective realm, and so the amplification of the subjective realm as a personality behind the face of the whole cosmos was, you can say, like, what's strange? I think Carl Jung, he is in some sense in his work sharing the skeleton of the inspiration of religion. Carl Jung again has this quote where he says, "Unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What does that mean? That means your eyes have opened in a landscape and you see that you're not just kept by what you know. There are many forces acting upon you currently that are unknown, that you're not aware of. It's kind of like a child, I don't know, growing up to a point where it can retain conscious memory, and then that child, uh, and then that child, it develops a character and identity, but it has no clue when it was a baby who held it. You know, show me someone who remembers when they were just born, who what what the doctor's face looked. So what I mean by that is there are many forces. There was theme I wanted to actually I wanted to name this title if the talk of this the title for tonight is multidimensional space for singular design. And the inspiration there was that it's as if at some point the intelligence, once it has confronted the void and the singular, will move on to the dual. And once the dual has become conscious of the presence of the void and the singular, it becomes infinite. It's like a caterpillar, automatically just grows wings. Once it goes through a cocoon and the past archetype fails and the modern archetype develops, or is found as an inspiration. So anyways, the idea is that it's like this unknown vastness, and we're here to make it conscious. Now, with the discovery of the nature of the mind, the ability to worship a subject is another way of saying like, think of it this way: if man worshiped nature like a tree, it's as if he's worshiping an object that he feels he did not create. Now, if a man worships a chair, that's an object being worshipped by made by another human mind. Now, when it comes to subjects, the whole point of the concept of revelation, which many religions it's the key pillar for, is that the subjects came and moved from a position that was not just man, right? That's why that was the whole buzz. That a revelation had occurred. Something was suddenly known. Something, and it was, what it was? I think religion for the villager back in the day, who all he had was like a house and just animals, farm animals. That dude was like, okay, maybe there is something new happening. We forget the fact that any event in history had a sort of novel impact. You know, it's so what I mean by that is that every human being has pretty much been in the same game of an unknown landscape where one is a conscious factor and trying to move. Now their relationship with how they are conscious, this is where it gets multidimensional, and our world is so multidimensional, you know, and we don't acknowledge it. We move away from concepts of multidimensionality, you know and it's as if, like, what is the singular purpose? All those people who are running towards like trying to find a oneness and a sort of esoteric spiritual oneness. It's like, what's oneness gonna do after? Do you know they're literally, when you go towards oneness, you're actually going out. Like I say this, there's two exits out of the dualistic dimension where language is kept in, is kept projected in. Now, when you leave the linguistic simulation, the two exits are infinity, or they are coming back to the singular, and then there's another exit, which is the void. Do you know? That means when you reverse engineer duality, you go to the void. When you keep engineering expanding duality, it becomes infinite. So it's like the mind getting an ability to add one dimension, then it's like, why don't I add as many as I want? And subconsciously, this is happening for people, and that is why imagination is very instant, because we have this one impression. Okay, I just got a thought, But in another way, one can see these various rivers, layers, systems of intelligence going, and it's as if a cherry-picked kind of alignment of memories that comes as the projected identity you know so it's this is a crucial factor, because it seems man has been reflecting through everything he has been worshiping. So there was a time people worshiped objects and they're like, yo, this is so godly, and again the dude's like, give me my freaking chair back, why do you keep coming back? you know and then when it came to a subject, now a subject is not tangible. So our truth went to a face to the void that is not physical. Like, you could take an object out of a person's hand, but you can't take a subject. So that subject is in the presence. Like, every person's subject, I say that the moment has an objective realm and a subjective realm, and pretty much these are two sides of the same coin, or you can say two eyes that see the same. So on some level, I'm saying it's like we thought objects was God, We moved on to subjects. Now the subjects, it's strange, but there's a sort of submission of the individual's world to access the divine will in many mystical traditions. So what does that mean? That means as you get closer to the sun, you can't see. So similarly, when one gets closer to an experiential truth, the image component of it lessens, or as Mr. Within would say, it becomes dynamic, right? So I feel we're all living lives behind our eyes that we have all been silent about unnecessarily. The mind speaks, yet what listens is not of the mind. The quality of observance is the strength of the free will. And so, really, on some level, trying to map human psychology, as Carl Jung attempted, it's like trying to map the flickering of a candle flame that after billion years, 4 billion years, it has opened its sight. So, in other words, we went from idol worship to ideal worship to language worship. And this is why the mystical practices of silence and stillness pretty much blow the Western person's mind because their societies are built to expand speed without quality control. So I can say Western cultures do have more freedom, but the quality of their experience could in some sense be more prone to stress, but in it's pretty much, it doesn't have to even do with Western, Eastern, pretty much more developed countries, which have more advanced technologies, they're also becoming more bound to the limitations that that technology brings. I mean, think about it. Even if you want to use a wrench, a tool, that tool is a kind of technology. I consider it as such because it has a utility that there can be a user for. And so it's like when a person picks up the wrench, it occupies your right hand. So when a human being speaks, it occupies. It occupies that sort of omniscient sense of the presence. So it's like, here's the thing. We think we are an individual first, then it's an individual acting. But believe it or not, if we don't move and say anything, we're nothing technically. We're just attention in a moment. So it's as if like the nature of movement is the generation of meaning. And this can kind of take me to how I saw certain parallels, of course, in the It's how can I tell you? Like we had a person called Buckminster Fuller, where when he was asked, like, "Yo, what is God?" and he when he thought about it, he said it's not a noun, it's a verb. So he saw it as a verb. Now, check this out. There was also another person, I think they were alive near the same time, Alfred Whitehead, you know? And Alfred Whitehead, I remember his whole thing was that he had stopped seeing the universe as particles, and yet he had seen the universe as a process. So the human being is not just stuff here, it is stuff that is in a greater rhythm, which is the process of life, pretty much. Do you know? And now this sort of notion of the process, it could have gone different directions. Do you know? And I feel simply with my framework, I mean, I feel every philosopher is pretty much no, like the philosophical vision I find enters a person when they suddenly feel, when it comes to the inner realms, they're stranded on an island. Now, what does that mean? That means nobody has your eyes. So if you were to study your eyes, your intelligence as a human being, you're the only one who could actually truly do it. Do you know? I don't know how the concept of a teacher external to the person can exist when the person seeing the teacher is actually not seeing who the teacher sees it, like how the teacher sees himself in the mirror and how the student sees the teacher are two totally different teachers, yet they are the same person. You know, and it has to do more with the potential of how when we look at others, of course they appear as objects, but when we look at ourselves, we appear as a subject to ourselves. But now when we think about the what's the deeper intelligence of the object, let's say the other person, now we begin to have to see there's a subject to them. Now either they communicate first and they plant the picture of who they are, or in some sense the person has to take an impression. Do you know? And I've trust me, I've been a silent kid in my youth. Like you don't believe. Sometimes I've been so quiet that's like a day has gone by and I hadn't said anything. Do you know what I mean? Like this was in my youth, right? Because I had become, I felt it subconsciously rejected by life. It was a very strange time because I had kind of made certain important qualities that were necessary as negative values, you know? It's pretty much like, anyways. So, in other words, Fuller saw it as a verb, Whitehead saw it as a process, and Mr. Within is seeing it as living geometry. That's the banner I'm holding. You know, for me, geometry is the next great language of all languages. That means my whole like what's even what if somebody said what's more fascinating than these Mr. Within talks, I would say trying to create a new geometrical language because I feel that it's a translation. So any person, imagine you're a UN translator hearing this, you know, if you pay attention, especially those people who speak more than one language, when, for example, it has to do with your last exposure of using that word and the image that was ascribed to it. So, what does that mean? That means if a person is in a good place and they say vocally, this is bad, it's as if their mind is resisting something that it shouldn't. It's unnecessarily going against the river, you know, and a lot of I find what is stress for the modern mind is that I feel when a subject became a god, eventually all external look appearing phenomena, this includes the inner realm, will be realized not to be the person. So what that means is something, you know how we stop any sort of worshiping, it has to be a conceptual non-existence. What does that mean? That means the worshiper attempts to worship itself and realizes it's a paradoxical kind of impossibility, do you know? And therefore, it results back into a state of inaction where the whole moment is the action. Right now, you feel you're a certain part of the action of the moment because the nature of the mind has been fragmented by time, by the linearization of time. Pretty much, we shot an arrow into space and we called that time. You know. So, in some sense, the evolution of attention from a moment that felt it was, or let's say from as form in quotations, as form, that means the creature felt it was the actual form. So, what that means is before individual consciousness, creatures felt they were the whole planet, I think. And I think this is why the ancient notion of titans appear, you know? Because if you think about it, excuse me, pretty much, guys, the evolution of attention from, I've written it here, as form to then to form. Pretty much, it was, you can say the subjective evolution was the separation of the earth from itself. And now that subjective evolution was very profound because when you go and ask various religious people that what is God, it becomes an unconceptual notion, yet it's the mightiest, it is the all of alls, you know? I feel that psychology is still an unknown area of study. And I feel that a lot of human potential is being wasted to meaningless activity that only that individual human being's eyes see. And if we consider a world that we are at least attempting to build an advanced civilization, you know, sometimes the greatest failure is having the potential to do something and not doing it. Life is many people can rationalize it in various ways. It's another way of saying you get access to the color of sensory perception, then you color palette of the sensory perception, and then you draw it in many ways. And for now, how subjective experience is appearing to the human being It is appearing as a sort of relationship of form separate to the space. So, believe it or not, all systems of knowledge, they relate to self in world pretty much. You're pretty much studying the relationship of the self with the world and the relationship of the world with the self. Now, this relationship was so complex because back in the day, it was just the world. Then the self emerged, but before the world self emerged, what occurred was the objective evolution, in other words, limbs. So one of the most mysterious thing for me is how the idea or the concept or how what in nature explains the requirement to create a creature with legs. Do you know? And this may feel, people will say, what do you mean, Mr. Within? It's just nature, creatures have to move around. And I know, but that's an explanation after creatures have been. If we think before, it's as if, why would there be this much of a sophisticated design for creaturehood? So, I remember when I was a young kid, like, I don't know, maybe I was like 5, like in Iran, me and my brother, I have a twin brother, and we would go in the backyard and look for stones. And I remember I would just see insect life, and for example, you look at a snail, and I was just looking at it, and I'm like, this form is so strange. It's like this creature is so strange to me. The snail looked like an alien to me, you know and so what I mean by that is that it's like, here's the thing. Think of the most simplest way to explain the human form as an energetic presence that is conscious of itself through a personality. Okay, so it's not in other words, we are conscious energy. Now this conscious energy has focused on, or its consciousness has been reflected back to itself as first as an object, then as a subject. Now it's an evolution back into the space. So it's as if it's strangely, psychologically, I think the human mind, first of all, it's filled with stories. What does that mean? That means the identity requires to do something. That means there is some level of subconscious self expression that is world building. So what does that mean? That means sometimes you're building the meaning before you enter into it, and that's kind of like why we have the concept of intentions. When a human being has an intention, what is that? It's as if it's like something projected out of their inner realms. And if we don't have this division of the inner realm and the outer realm, you'll see just this idea I'm telling you. If they considered, if mainstream considered a subjective evolution, the evolution of a subject, pretty much matter evolved to be a thought to itself and then become such an unfathomable mystery that just by the presence of its experience it found uh, a sort of rhythmic collective navigation. The way kind of the world seems now, or I find the mainstream kind of holds it, is that there were designs before there was a designer. If there were designs before there was a designer, which kind of leads us to the cosmological argument, if there were designs before the designer, it means the concept of a designer is the effect of meaninglessness. If there was a designer before the design, only one way that could be explainable is that if the designer has nothing to do, that means we have no choice if we are to consider higher dimensions of intelligence, we have no choice to consider other than considering ourselves limited. So, believe it or not, your limitations are access points to the limitless. It's like the psychology requires a point to refer to know where it has gotten to. This notion about experiential truth, it's another way of saying conceptual truth. When people fight over beliefs, they are fighting over indirect projections of meaning in accordance to how much images they have perceived. I feel what we kind of missed out on, this should have probably happened before I was born. But is that the cultural dimension should have found that it's like we started considering ourselves as known entities. I am telling you, Terence McKenna says there's an archaic revival, but let me tell you what's coming after that. It's this archaic revival, this resurfacing of ancient values in modern ways. It is, how can I tell you, it is like the beginning. What where we are moving to as a species, I feel. What can I say? Alone on a rock, a man did not look at the stars. He looked at the room, wall, you know. He looked at the room he was in. And he noticed that perception is free. There is free will, but the landscape, in order to access more, has put various barriers. And the fact that human beings had to adjust to the world to survive is a suggestion that we have to now adjust. Or how can I say it? It has been mainly an adjustment of our inner realms to the accuracy of the outer realm. But I feel we must also have the ability to perceive and study and examine the unknown. So I thought of what would be the opposite of what the scientist is doing. And suddenly I kind of got the sense that philosophers are the scientists of the subjective realm. Scientists are the philosophers of the objective realm. So, yeah, when I look at design and I consider what is here looking at it, I mean, of course, I first start with what I know and I quickly acknowledge it. So it's like, what does the person know? Imagine the eyes just open right now, consciousness just instantly arrived. It would be a situation where the person would see designs of the landscape of the world. So it's as if your world, or beautifully, it's like as much as the world is your projection, you are a projection of the world. You are in the objective realm, the world is projecting you. In the subjective realm, you are projecting the world. It's a reverse multidimensionality, this beautiful symmetrical mirroring. You see, I feel the concept of titans in Greek mythology, titans set loose, was the concept of suddenly secrets revealed, or you can say a sort of. how would I say it? Like an exploration of the highest value, something like that. The world can strangely to be said that a percentage of it is a figment of our imagination. Therefore, the human being has an access, has an ability in one moment to experience itself as a particle projecting a field, as a complex set of particles projecting a field, or it can experience itself as a field projecting the particles. That means either it's confusion in one dimension or it's clarity in two dimensions. And that's why I'm saying, in order to advance civilization, we have to usher in the yin yang civilization. So, what that means is just whoever you are, the yin yang symbol is a concept that any sort of dualistic phenomena is echoing within itself. So imagine like the worst sense of you. It's like so. Think of the yin yang symbol. The white part is the greatest version of you. The black part is the worst version of you. Now imagine when you actualize, when you feel like you are the greatest version of you, there is some doubt. And that doubt is, for example, wait, what if you're not good enough, And then you see in the worst version of you, there's your conscience. Instead of that doubt, doubt has suddenly transformed into conscience, you know? And so it's like that yin yang relationship. And I personally feel the way the yin yang symbol was meant to be drawn, but they couldn't back in the day, was simply because it's the same yin yang symbol going inside each of the holes. So each dot inside it has another yin yang symbol, and those dots have yin yang symbols, and it's this endless kind of dance of duality, you know. Or as Carl Jung would say, it's as if like to kind of as we take steps towards like actualizing the self will have to confront its shadow. That means some things it's direct, you see from its light, and some things are it's not direct. Do you know? I feel our civilization uh, is de-evolving through dreams of digital progress. And so the relationship of man and nature, look at this picture I've chosen. I don't know who the artist is, but it's incredible, the illustrator. And you see, it's as if we have to get to that point. We have to, as human beings, attain an ability to become interstellar. I've spoken about this is pretty much my a very core part of my outlook upon the objective realm. That my efforts are to constantly, I realize kind of like I saw three phases and I saw this concept of civilization 2.0. And currently I assume that, okay, whatever I see right now, the civilization, however updated it is, ultimately, I feel in every talk, everything I've ever done in this life, it has come to me as, in some sense, the spirit or the ultimatum of advancement. Pretty much, I realize that many people can look at the world differently, and they can. And many people, it's like as we change throughout the years, we're a different person to ourselves, even. How fascinating is the mind? And so when we can kind of treat our subjective realms, I'll get to civilization 2.0 in a second, but like once we become aware, literally, like as I'm speaking to you, if you still think these words that I'm saying is me, if you feel the subject that you're extracting from the sounds that I'm making, is me. For example, that's not a conscious acknowledgement of the subjective realm, of our inner realms. Imagination comes as our private room. That means when you visualize something and somebody else is visualizing, or two people are in an elevator, you can totally see how in their minds they're also in two different rooms. So it's as if two different world views are in the same elevator. 8 billion world views are in the same planet. Pretty much, I have this strategy towards knowledge is that I look at something and I notice everything I know, I can also know the reverse instantly. So what that means is any moment in your life, even you can get a piece of paper if it's easier for you and write it down, but you can write down literally who you are and then write down the opposite. And for me, many experiences that I can say that externally would have been intense or savage to some degree, or through my writing, through my imagination, I got to a sort of realism of them, and then I no longer needed the experience. So you see, it's not just about accumulating, powerful survival in this world. It's also about the value of what is here and to truly come to terms with it or comprehend it and understand it. Once there is this great awakening to the language threshold, we can properly begin Civilization 2.0, which is an effort of all resources, of all technological institutions, to suddenly realize, all right, this makes sense. We got to lift the civilization into the air. I feel if we are living in a two-dimensional plane, yeah, overpopulation unnecessary. But if we utilize the three-dimensional space, then it means that it's as if there would be so much space. So what that means is we should actually be investing all our technologies in trying to build sky cities, and pretty much civilization is going to be like a spaceship, but we're going to live in our orbit. Now check this out. We notice that when man is on the earth, disruption, species are going extinct, a lot of messed up stuff is happening. But imagine if we lived in our orbit and it wasn't like there was a ban, but there was this major effort of everybody having to live in, of not having to, but like being required, if they care for Civilization 2.0's effort. And so the idea is that for 2,000 years, we want like, let's say 90% of the civilization, or whatever. Like, let's say all of it actually. I don't think that, yeah, it won't be possible the other way. Okay, so here's the thing. We are pretty much taking man's disruption on the earth into our sky. And I'm not saying that we have to stop living the way we are. We can progress like this, but the first thing is very obvious that phase one of Civilization 2.0 gets civilization into the sky as quickly as possible. Now, the second part, second phase of Civilization 2.0, as I've designed, it's as if this is the thing. We plant earth, and or we can say we plant replant a new earth. In other words, we make earth into and I think I could give it a poetic name, Project Earth Heavena. You know, like pretty much we got human beings into the sky, and when I say sky, not like 100 meters in the sky, far up in the sky where we're beside the clouds. Or maybe some level higher up where there's no disturbances and there's no problem of living. You know, I don't know the exact elevation of the Sky City, but I think that would be easy to figure out by the time this idea uh, starts running. But the whole thing is that we pretty much, there's this ancient mystical idea that instead of the person feeling they're on earth and they have to get into heaven, they begin to see earth is in heaven, earth is in the heavens, you know. And so that's such a crucial idea because it means the free will through its effort has access to you can say making conscious unknown rhythms. And that's the experiential truth. That means I'm telling you, God is a very beautiful concept because it is showing the end. How can I tell you? The end of days of, in some sense, being living as only as an individual. Do you know what I mean? That pretty much it's like earth is in heaven, therefore the search is non existent. So it's instantaneous, the truth you're seeking. So an instantaneous truth cannot be an object. How can I tell you? Sorry, not that it can't be an object. Um, how can I tell you? It can't be an object, but the way I gotta tell you that it's because there has to be attention in the room first. But it's kind of like we're reaching the point when we take off the mask of language and experience the presence of the naked mind, and the naked mind is not ideological, it's experiential. So phase two, we start replanting. We pretty much the effort of phase two is in 2000 years trying to make Earth as if it's a heavenly paradise planet in that we it's like a new planet pretty much, you know. And so as we live in our sky cities, the way it's going to occur now, I've spoken about what's going to happen to nationalhood, but I'm not going to bring it up in this talk because it's too long. But now, phase three of Civilization 2.0 is that while Earth heals, while we build heaven on Earth, or you know, we build paradise on Earth, or turn Earth back into a paradise, and we're living in our sky cities, our orbit cities, you know. Then, in those orbit cities, in those sky cities, I have considered that phase three would be, in some sense, the evolution of the interstellarization. The interstellarization, all right, I'll coin that, you know, of an outer technology and an inner technology. So, pretty much, on some level, our psychology is advancing towards unfathomable experiential rhythms, and on another level, we are space-bound physical individual beings that we are exploring the stars. And phase three of Civilization 2.0 is, I want you to imagine you're walking in this sky city, you know, you're on just, you know, the street or whatever, you know, you're just walking, and suddenly there comes this person, and he says we are seeking pilots, scouting for pilots. And people are like, pilots for what? He's like, now we're taking initiatives of intelligent initiatives towards the building an interstellar civilization. That means there's no aliens yet, but guess what, we're going to repopulate as much as we can. You know, we're going to pretty much um, gracefully um, continue our species, and we have to be careful of one thing, of preserving the biological life, preserving the biological life. And what does that mean? That means Civilization 2.0 in phase 3, in those inside those sky city, we will have on some level dreamers who are seeking to go to the forest depths of the earth. You know, we'll have actual children wanting to be interstellar pilots, you know. And then we would also have people who are now caring for the inner technology, which means the evolution of the psychology of the civilization. So in those 2000 years, as we're living in our orbit and Earth is healing, we are also at the same time building, how can I tell you, as a civilization, strategizing. And let me tell you something interesting, because I thought, if we as human beings stay on Earth, what do we expect to happen? And this is pretty much the only reason a futurist calls themselves a futurist, because the future is going to become incredibly technologically advanced. And what does that mean? That means we are becoming occupied by our toys, toys that we created, to such a degree we're becoming the toy, we're infusing with the toy. You know, there are companies trying to connect human brains to computers, and it's not that it's a bad thing. It's like, that's progress, but it's progress in a strange direction, and I wonder if it's a direction the collective can confront, because anything a person can't confront, they freak about, and they go into a negative, you can say, frequency of karmic direction. So it's as if, like, you see, life is building something while you are building yourself in the moment. And when you can become differentiate between the two as the witness that is aware of the subjective and the objective realm simultaneously, then it would be a very profound mind, where you can say it would be, for the first time, it's like we kept the body of the civilization healthy. Now the mind of the civilization, we got it healthy to such a degree, it went towards the unknown. And what happens in the unknown? Two things happen, guys. Either nothing, or there is reanimation, right? Because if we're considering as creatures intelligence to be just movement and just making sound, and that's not, that would devalues all the other ways that knowing is present, yet before vocalized it's as if non-existential to the sensory perceiver. So you see, we have to kind of care for our experiences, and eventually realize that, okay, what are the options? Look at some gray, dull, cubic kind of civilization, with the dirtiest streets, or should we build a civilization where the human being can't wait to go and be a part of civilization? So right now, the way the civilization is built is, for many people, it doesn't feel like home. So there's this distrust. So when it comes to collective responsibility, we're really missing out, you know? But imagine that when you opened your house door, you did not feel you're going to somewhere less safe than your house. Imagine you felt as if you opened the door to paradise, the paradise of an advanced civilization. Now, here's the thing: if we were to stay on Earth, think about virtual reality becoming, after AI, the next big thing, that imagine we somehow managed a way to be compatible with AI, and AI was like, all right, human beings, you're cool, I'll do what you want. you know and we're like, that's the most human thing you can do, AI. You see, we are going to go into a place where I think maybe in 150 years from now, maybe it might be the birth of the first children who are getting lost in cyberspace. And what does that mean? That means in my science fiction, I had created a setting where these parents had left their young child, and the parents got into an accident and could never come back home. And this young child accidentally had worn these Oculus, no, sorry, not Oculus, some sort of goggles, future, like it's not even goggles, it was like wire kind of pads and whatnot. And so this child is being deprived of its life because the power has become endless, so the game is endlessly running. So this kid is lost in a simulation. Do you know? And the story is how the kid gets out of the simulation when he has to discover a glitch, and he comes out and he sees he's this kid barely about to die. That means it's the you can say the neo future tragedy of getting lost in cyberspace. So that right now you can say yogis on Earth are like, yo, this material world is an illusion. But it's gonna be at that point where people are gonna try to feel they want to find the real Earth. You know? Anyways, guys, it seems I don't know, pretty much attention can move in various ways. I feel a conscious civilization is becoming conscious of the inconceivable, hence realizing getting an eternal power to update itself. That means it's like there's going to be a time where we're going to laugh when somebody says writer's block, you know? And it's like we're going to be like, you got to cut that writer's block, like an axe cutting wood, a block of wood. Yeah. So, anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. Pretty much the intention I had was of philosophical interest. You know, for me, if somebody asked me, "What do you believe in, Mr. Within?" I would say, first of all, believe. I would say, I would say that I feel language cannot contain the truth, so it's an unknown, direct experiential presence. Therefore, literally you can't shape it. You can't shape a river. Like, who can tell you, you know what moving water, like how a drop moves in a river. It's like it is the river. It's dynamic. So I have realized that the ambition towards knowledge is the acknowledgement of the endless unknown. And once we confront that, scholars will begin to able to now realize their value is in running back to their cultural program and updating the cultural programs of civilization. So pretty much we worshipped objects, we worship subjects. Now people have heard the archaic revival has brought the resurfacing of, now trying to find your true selves. The whole self-help industry is based on that, you know. And so really it's kind of like, you can say a glitch. Because regardless existence, it's like we're creatures that we don't just have. Our energy is like speed, and our free will is like direction. So it's like conscious living is a velocity, do you know? Has It is literally a velocity. That means it's like I'm sitting here. If I don't paint a direction, it's as if I would have nothing to say, do you know? But as I come to paint this talk, I suddenly begin to see that the images behind my mind move differently, and as various emotions are evoked, or you can say subjective, I call them stretching. So what does that mean? That means I have kind of personally, my inner realms, the taste of my mind is, or the mode it appears to me is very geometric. So for me, I find a strange solace in infinite geometry. I don't know why. There's something about geometry that it's as if it's a familiar. There's something familiar about it. I feel the way light is, yes, on some level it's just reflecting what is there, but on another level, I think in a very in a wave that we cannot see, it is incredibly geometric. The whole world is just pure vibrating geometry, living geometry. You know. So, anyways, guys, and something I wanted to say, I didn't have space to write it in the YouTube title, but actually, the whole lecture in the subtitle, I've written experiential truth. I want to say experiential truth and non-conceptual attention, and that's what I feel where we're being moved towards, and that non-conceptual attention. It really can't have a form, but it can have a direction, or it can have an appearance, and its appearance will literally mean collective a service. That means you have lived in your inner realms to a degree where you're realizing that it's like the outer realms. The outer realms has a purpose too. So it's as if it tends to be win lose, win for the ego of the person, lose for the world. We have to turn that into win win. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And when a subject became a god, man realized the unknown was here, was always here. Much blessings and namaste.